Good evening, Marta Alberti.
Good evening, ArchaeoSoup.
Good evening. Welcome to Meet the Archaeologist. Now, you are an Italian person, are you not?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
I'm the resident Italian and site archaeologist. I've been working here at the Vindolanda Trust for the past 3 years and still enjoying it immensely.
Excellent. Now, the reason why I said that in a slightly Monty Pythonish kind of way is that it's kind of appropriate that you are an Italian working on Hadrian's Wall. I mean, we can basically almost see the wall from here, and Vindolanda's just over there. But at the same time, it's also kind of strange. What actually got you from Italy to the north of England? How did you end up here?
That is a question I get asked a lot. We have quite a lot of contact with the visitors here at Vindolanda, and everyone wants to know what an Italian is doing up here when we have so much archaeology ourselves. So my story is a bit of a strange story. I did my master's at Newcastle University, and then I tried and go back to Italy and look for work as a Roman archaeologist, or indeed as a commercial archaeologist, which is, I believe, the way most of us begin. But unfortunately, it was very hard to do so in Italy. I had a quite comfortable base here in Newcastle. So I decided that I would come back and spend some time digging commercial in England, and that was a lot more successful than my attempt in Italy. And I worked in commercial archaeology for a while, and that took me quite far away from Newcastle, which I had kind of learned to call home. So I ended up in Lincolnshire, and I had a fantastic experience down there, but it was indeed commercial archaeologist. And to summarize, I was digging very fast and covering things up real quick and not really telling anyone about it. And as every good Italian, I'm really chatty, and I'm interested in involving the public and engaging volunteers and really everyone interested in the past into excavation and archaeology. So one happy day, this popped up on British Archaeological Jobs and Resources, and I applied, and here I am.
Okay. So I suppose that also begs the question, were you interested in Romans when you lived in Italy?
See, in Italy we have it's quite a different high school from England. So we have, when you turn 14, you can choose between 3 different high schools. And those are the main ones that everyone chooses between. You can choose between a scientific type high school that focuses a lot on chemistry, maths, all the things that you need to then proceed to do a scientific degree. Then you have a linguistic high school, which focuses very much on learning new languages. So you learn 4 languages in your 5 years of high school. And then we have a classical high school that focuses very much on Latin, Greek, history and archaeology. So I knew since I was 14 that I actually wanted to be an archaeologist, and in particular that I was really interested in Rome. So
it sounds as though you had quite a comprehensive introduction, pre-university introduction to this sort of heritage and history.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. That's something to admire, I think. Okay, well that's the elephant in the room out of the way.
That's the Italian on the Hadrian's Wall.
Elephant out of the room. Actually, what's Italian for elephant?
Elefante.
Oh, okay.
It's very similar, isn't it?
That's less exciting than I thought it would be.
No, you thought it was going to be some exotic bit. Everyone is always very surprised because when we learn Latin in high school, we really get in touch with our roots, really, because it's who we are. And then you come here on Hadrian's Wall and you find out that it's actually a shared past, and that the empire has branched out, and that people share with you that same past and those same values. And it's really quite interesting to talk about that same past and those same values and say, look, I'm Italian, you're British, but we share this thing and we can talk about it.
Actually, it's just before I move on to the question I was going to ask, that's an interesting point. So actually, I was talking to my lovely wife this morning, Mrs. Soup, on the way to work, about this idea that these things never, in many respects, never just end. So, for example, we inherited the Roman tradition of wedding rings and this kind of thing, and blah blah blah. In that sense, there is an echo, and especially in this landscape, there's a very obvious echo of the Roman period.
Absolutely.
But that sort of leads on to this question of this site. It's been being dug for generations. It's a privately owned site, and every time we come here, I can't help but wonder whether or not it is as luxurious as it seems from the outside. I mean, how wonderful is it to be able to dig at a site like this?
It is just incredible. The things that you pull out of the ground, the perfect preservation of incredible objects. I think at the beginning of this season, a very, very pretty little Batavian knife that you can catch on our Facebook was extracted from the anaerobic materials in the excavation that you can see behind my shoulders. And it was just so stunning. The blade was still there. It doesn't lose its appeal every time you excavate something. And then there is the challenge, because of course there is 9 separate forts at Vindolanda, and it's always like solving an incredible puzzle that keeps giving you little clues, and that sometimes throws you a bit off your seat, and then you pick it back up and you're just like, "Ooh, I've got this." So it doesn't lose its shine even after 3 years, or even after 50. Indeed, we've started. The trust was founded in the 70s, and we're still here enjoying every minute of it.
Well, I think that's what I guess that's what I was getting at, in so much as, I mean, you alluded to this idea that you were digging hard and fast down south, and you were not necessarily getting to enjoy the sites as you were digging them. You were just having to sort of dig, record, put that in a grey file somewhere, and that's done. Yeah. Whereas that must be the complete polar opposite to digging on a site like Vindolanda.
Absolutely, it is. It is.
So in that sense, then, I suppose the follow-on there is, does that make you? How does that affect your decision making? In so much as, do you sort of approach these problems on site with the mindset of, well, actually, there's no time limit, so you can do things maybe in a different way, or more slowly, or more carefully, or maybe even you can be a bit more reckless even. I mean, does it give you certain freedoms?
It certainly isn't down the reckless route. I remember enjoying excavating big slots of ditches, because you had to pay attention to where the edges were, but you didn't have to pay attention to the layering, because in commercial archaeology you record in section. You don't do single context excavation, which for your viewers who haven't done commercial archaeology, it means just dig a big box and then look at the flat edge of the box and have a look at the things that you can see inside the profile. So it's fast. It's very tidy. But it is less careful. So here, because that there is so many amazing things hiding in the ground, you're a bit more careful. And in that, not having a team of builders kind of running after me and wanting me to be done with it so that they can build really helps. On the other hand, there is a lot more to do than there is on a commercial site. So you not only have to excavate your little slot, you also have to manage and help 25 to 40 people understand what you're doing. You have to make sure that they're enjoying it and having a good time, because if the volunteers don't come back, then we don't do anything. Can you imagine digging this massive site behind my shoulders with 3 archaeologists? So you have to make sure everyone is having a good time and at the same time is understanding what they're doing. You have to make sure you're understanding what you're doing, and in all of this you have to interface with the public and make sure that they understand that you positively want to discuss stuff with them. So there is more time, and at the same time there is less time, because in all of that, of course, you have to accurately record everything exactly as you would on a commercial site. You have to plot artifacts. You have to explain to your volunteers, who might be from any walk of life. You might be talking to a veterinarian or to a doctor who has never seen a Roman pot before, so you have to explain what is pot and what is rock and how you define
what is not.
Yeah. Pot, we call it pot or rock. It's a good game.
Yeah. Do you lick it?
I try not to. I've been told that the best, one thing that I've learned from commercial is that the best way to do it is to rub the section and have a look at the fabric. But I know people that do lick fines. I'm not of that school. No. The
other day I was introduced to someone who was trying to extol the virtues of smelling everything you dig up.
That is actually a really good point at Vindolanda, because as I was saying, we've got 9 layers, 9 separate levels of occupation. Some of them are anaerobic, so you can catch Soup's other videos about the anaerobic levels and the excavation, but they do smell quite peculiar, and it's one of those things, you're about to find some really nice stuff when it starts smelling.
Yeah.
Like I don't think I can summarize it any better. When it starts having that peculiar anaerobic smell, you're onto the good stuff.
It's wet, and it's the smell of life. That sounds weird, but it's that smell of because I once was lucky enough to dig a portion of a Viking loo at a site called Hungate in York. So it's like a secondary excavation, nowhere near as big as Coppergate. But there is something about when you uncover that, and suddenly it starts to be a bit more, it's been exposed to the air, it becomes,
Of course, it's stuff that's been hiding in there for 1,800 years.
Yeah. And
the moment you uncap the clay that's been sealing it, the process of decay starts. And then, again, to go back to your, where are your time constraints, there is a time constraint, because the moment you uncap it, you start fighting a losing battle against the water that wants to fill up your trench, you that want to empty it, and the wood that starts to decay. So we need to lift all the wood that we need to lift, plan it all though, before we lift it, and then it needs to be transported real quick to the lab, which you can't see from here, but is located down next to the museum. And there it starts its conservation.
Very steep incline as well. That must present challenges for carrying some of the material.
I think some of the most challenging material was the big stones. So if you ever were to shoot a nice Soup tour of the museum, you'd find that, for example, the altar of Jupiter Dolichanos was a bit tricky to move. It is about as tall as I am sitting, and perfectly and finely carved, and it's a very delicate object, and it was tricky to set it in a position because it's got carvings on sides, so you need to choose which side you want the public to see, and then kind of carefully hoist it down. So it's always, we do have our challenges despite not having anyone running after us to complete it all.
Well, actually that leads on to, I guess, almost logically the next element of the site, and that is the site as a visitor centre and as a museum. Where does your role begin and end in that process? I mean, you mentioned sort of the idea of choosing how, for example, certain artifacts are displayed to the public. But if you are essentially running the dig,
the curator takes care of all of that.
Okay.
We deliver it into her expert hands, and she's actually been doing a marvelous job, so much so that with the rest of the Vindolanda team we have managed to secure a 1.3 million funding from the Heritage Lottery Fund.
Right.
So you probably can't see it behind my shoulders, but there is some machines working down next to the museum, and they are building us a new museum extension, which will include a it's called the Vindolanda Wooden Underworld project, so it will include a new room with special cases for all our wooden artifacts that so far have been, carefully stored, and they're going to be coming back out and be on display for the public. And it's also going to include a new activity centre.
Okay.
So it is actually very much a team effort. Everyone works together to get everything on the road. So the HLF extension carries a job as a activity person, which will deal with the day-to-day organization of the space and the evaluation of the impact of the activities that we intend to run. And then it's really important the role of our marketing team as well. So we've got the Facebook and the Twitter and the Instagram. I've lost count of all the social media that our marketing person deals with. So I'd say it's very much the case that if we all are at the service of one another.
Yeah.
So we work for the marketing team, but the marketing team works for us, and we work for the curator, and at the same time the curator displays what we find. So I would say it's one of those very well engineered mechanisms.
Yeah. And so, and I guess in that sense, then, do they have to sort of chase you for the latest thing, or do you just find yourself naturally passing information on to say, here's a photo of something we found today, this kind of thing?
We have a very, very organized system. So every time we find something, we first plot it, and then we insert it in a database day to day. So every day the database of the small finds is updated. So we provide the small finds number and a primary interpretation. But of course our interpretation, especially in the case of very corroded iron, for example, it can be entirely wrong. But we find that it's useful to give
something.
Something.
Yeah,
so we do provide a primary interpretation, and when we find something particularly stunning, we do immediately send it to our marketing person, Sonia. And yeah, so every Friday, all of our small finds start their conservation process, and our curator Barbara has the list that we've been filling up as we work, and she knows all about where it comes from. So it all comes to, a simple buzz of the radio asking, so where was this one found? I can see V17 5E, but it doesn't necessarily mean much to me. Where was the location? So that kind of stuff, kind of passing information to one another.
Okay, well, actually, something just occurred to me, and in terms of, I suppose, a related issue is almost this idea of, because in higher realms in terms of concept, people often talk about this idea of interpretation at the trowel's edge and all that kind of malarkey, the idea that you interpret as you dig, basically. But I can't help but wonder whether or not on a site like this, and especially since you are so obviously in that sense singing for your supper, you have to be open and you have to be encouraging people to come and look at the place. Is this almost interpretation as performance in some way? And that you're sort of, because you are putting it out there, you also have to be quite fluid with being able to say eventually, actually that interpretation was wrong. This is the interpretation. Yeah,
I don't think that's just us though. I think everyone starts with an idea about what you're going to find, and then actually archaeology has a way of surprising you. You find something that you weren't expecting to be there. Luckily we have the background of years of excavation behind our shoulders, and very experienced director of excavations, and basically his first visit was in the womb, so so we've got the benefit of experience. We do change our minds. I always say, if you never change your mind, you're probably wrong. It's especially with excavating a feature, you might think that you've got the edge, and then someone had cut an extra little bit, and actually the edge is not there. I wouldn't say it's performance. I would say it's more trying to share the knowledge, and as we progress in the excavation, saying, actually, remember, as I told you, that one was that kind of thing. We now have an updated interpretation. Actually, we do write once a month a blog to keep it up to date, to keep both the visitors and the people that are looking forward to coming and volunteering in the loop of what our interpretation is. I think our experience helps us, getting it quite right, but we do get it wrong sometimes, and we're happy to be corrected, and we're happy to listen to the colleagues along Hadrian's Wall and to see what they have to say if they found something similar. So,
and I'll move on to the more standard questions in a moment, but this, again, you keep on inspiring follow-ons in so much as, in that sense then, I suppose this is a two-parter. First of all, given that you are essentially working with a senior colleague who's been here since he was a child.
Absolutely. It's really helpful. It's incredibly helpful.
Is it helpful? But also, to what extent are you encouraged to be that sort of fresh pair of eyes, as it were?
I think it's very much, as I was saying, I don't think we could do it one without the other. No. I'm sure he could probably run the show on his own, but what I'm saying is, we have 2 areas of excavation now. So there is need of both supervisor, and we kind of always bounce ideas of each other, and we're still open to, you know, I think this is this. Tell me I'm wrong. I think it's a really interesting project. It does help that I'm very young. I am 26, so I'm not at this stage in my career in which if someone tells me I'm wrong, I go, oh my God, I'm wrong. My entire life is ruined. I am.
Just hide in the shed.
Yeah, I'll just go and hide in a corner. No, I'm at a stage of my career in which being told, actually, I don't think that's what it is, means, excellent, I'm going to learn from this, and the next one I find, I'll be correct in interpreting it.
That sounds like a very stimulating way to work in that sense. Though.
Yeah, it is really, it's a learning curve, and I am sure I've got so much left to learn, and I'm looking forward to learning it. There are so many areas that, you know, need looking into.
Well, the second part of that follow-on was, you mentioned this idea of other people along the wall, the Hadrian's Wall landscape.
Absolutely, we're one Hadrian's Wall and one frontier.
To what extent is there sort of like a collegiate, sort of, again, almost bouncing off each other in terms of information? I mean, how aware do you make each other of what's being found and how that affects each other's sites?
We're very, very well connected within the academic landscape in that Professor Ian Haynes is one of our trustees, and then we do have, you know, we do regularly attend the Hadrian's Wall Forum, so talk to David Petts, and of course, personal relationships, so you know, I did my master's at Newcastle University, so of course I learned my Roman finds with James Gerard exam, and you know, it is a dialogue. I think it is really interesting to be in the wider landscape and in the academic arena, and I think it's one of the things that the Trust takes very seriously. You know, we're an excavation, we're excavated by volunteers, we work a lot with the public, but that doesn't mean we are less willing to go full on academia. We're quite happy to you know, go full academia. You know, we do take part in racks and tracks, and we're going to be looking forward to RAC in Edinburgh in 2018. So it is definitely, you know, you can't do this in isolation. You can't just talk Vindolanda and that will be it. No. You've got to talk Vindolanda in the landscape, and not only the Hadrian's Wall landscape. It's important to look at it in the Limes context, and you know, I was talking to a colleague, and she's done some really interesting work on the forts in Boonjim, I think it's pronounced that way. Okay. So in the middle of the desert, and yet she's done a very, very interesting work on a kind of a distributional study. And she's now, I believe she's doing game encounters. She's made an application for a game encounters grant. So yeah, very much cross-fertilization of ideas and learning one from another.
Okay, so now is the portion of the interview where we move on to just a few questions I ask everyone, in so much as I like to have certain questions that can be compared. You know, I want to compare and contrast you lot.
Okay.
Or us lot, archaeologists. And the first one is, and this is usually quite a fun one to answer, what for you is the most satisfying element of being an archaeologist? What gets you up in the morning?
It's one of those questions that you've got a feeling that you should say something, but your real opinion is something else. Okay. So there is lots of things that get me up in the morning and, you know, get going and come in here and doing my job. But the reality of it is that on top of being a researcher and loving to do research, I just love to dig. So, yeah, I would say that one.
Okay, you're like a mole. Okay.
Yeah, if you can't find me, it's usually because I'm covered in mud, head to toe, rolling in it. I just enjoy the pleasure of doing something outside that's quite physical, that at the same time takes your mind to a place in which you have to focus on what you're doing. But then again, as I was saying at the beginning of the interview, I'm a very chatty person. So I like having a bit of a chat with the volunteers and having a bit of a chat with the people at the side of the trench. So I would say I love to dig in, but I'm also very, very academically and mindfully interested in people. And I think that's what brought me to do archaeology. Digging and people.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Whereas actually, in some ways, I'm kind of the opposite, because I started out in uni as a arch and specialisation,
Right.
Archaeology and anthropology, but I quickly learned that I much preferred the dead people. It was like, there's just too many, you can't, for example, you can't ask a question that not that I was asking grossly inappropriate questions, but there was this huge debate when I was first starting in anthropology about basically what can you ask of a society. Whereas you can ask almost any question of dead people, because they won't complain.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's that. The second question is, what challenges do you think are on the horizon for archaeology? And of course, I imagine you guys have a particular perspective as a self-funding enterprise in that sense. But,
it's a very interesting question. I'm actually about to start. I've accepted an unconditional offer for a PhD at Newcastle University, which will be looking at learning outcomes of volunteering in a Roman archaeological site in England. So I think the big challenge for research archaeology is to get itself out there. We've been flourishing and doing very well in universities and having nice conversations and really interesting and enriching conversations amongst ourselves. It's a real challenge to bring it outside and make sure that this conversation happens to a different level. I think archaeology has a lot of points in common with what's going on in society, and it has quite a lot of power to level the ground and bring us all to talk about one particular aspect of society or one particular thing that we find really interesting. So that's the main challenge in research archaeology.
So just to clarify, almost, for example, something that comes to mind would be on Hadrian's Wall, the very casual fact that you had people from the Netherlands, people from North Africa, whatever, living up here in the north of England, is an immediate challenge to some assumptions that people make about Italians marching around.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Professor Richard Hingley is really keen on the subject of archaeology and Brexit and those kind of things. So I think it is a very interesting common ground. It can get people talking about potentially uncomfortable subjects.
So taking this outside of a research agenda and bringing it into the public sphere.
Absolutely, and that, as you said, impacts on the funding perspective, because it is clear that in the economical and social position that we find ourselves right now, with a whole series of things happening outside the world of archaeology, it appears that funding for archaeology is, state funding for archaeology is actually set to decrease, but the need for archaeology is not decreasing, and the interest for people into archaeology is not decreasing. So you need to find a way to make archaeology happen without the funding, and that is a real challenge. And as far as commercial archaeology is concerned in terms of challenges, I think actually there is a lot of commercial units with incredible mental potential. There is some ex-colleagues of mine who would make incredible academics, and I think their input is really interesting. But because they're publishing great literature for the unit and for the kind of authority and for the person that commissioned the building, they never really get out there, and there is some things that you learn from commercial archaeology that really need to be discussed in academic arena.
So for example, one that might be pertinent would be archaeology as a data capture exercise.
Absolutely.
And the amount of data that's being captured. I imagine if you're working in a commercial unit and you're being exposed to that all the time, you must have some very particular perspectives that would be very helpful in academia.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Not that I meant to put anything into your mouth there, but
No, but I definitely agree with you, and of course the reason why the commercial side of things isn't getting into academia is because they need to get the job done, and they've got a certain amount of time to get the job done, and they also have a certain amount of money to get the job done, which impacts negatively on the salaries of the commercial archaeologists. And you know, these guys find themselves with a very small salary and having to make it for yourself. And of course you can just go off and do a master's if you're, you know, paying your rent and doing all those things. It's very hard, so I sympathize with their efforts, and I think it's a big challenge for non-academic commercial archaeology. It has improved since I left the field. It has improved notably, but you know, there is a shortage of archaeologists for all the buildings that are getting built. So
there's definitely an issue, and also I think there's a related issue in so much as there's an increasing number of commercial and also other levels of various, I suppose, commercialized interests who are producing data which is variously owned at various levels by various people. So, for example, sometimes a commercial unit might produce a grey literature that is completely embargoed and only belongs to the local
to the developer. Yeah, absolutely.
In other cases, you may have a unit which they want to essentially keep it as intellectual property.
Luckily, with the advent of ADS, that's become less of a problem. But again, ADS is a fantastic container, but it's a bit hard to navigate if you don't know what you're looking for. It's very helpful if you're looking for a site. You can just type it in and up it comes. But if you're not sure that there is a site in that particular area, it's not particularly helpful. So I'd say that there is good basis for cross-fertilization between academic and commercial archaeologists. Well, we've got a good basis. We just need to work on it.
Be more user-friendly, maybe. Okay, so the third question that I ask everyone is, what advice would you give to people who are interested in archaeology? So no matter their age, and I imagine you get all sorts of different age groups coming here and volunteering for the dig. What would you say to those people, or you know, if you can sort of imagine one or two people? Would you say,
persevere. No, persevere. It's a fantastic job that gives you a lot of satisfaction, and it's just the pleasure of discovering something new and learning about yourself. Persevere and never think you're right.
Never think you're right. I like that. Okay. Okay, well that's almost it, I guess. But one final question, I suppose. One final question. You've mentioned that you've just got this unconditional PhD. Well done.
Yeah, it's fabulous. I'm looking forward to starting it. Very excited.
Where do you see yourself in the coming years?
I just really like this place. That's the reason why it's only a part-time PhD. So it's going to take me 6 years to finish, but I will not be leaving here. I'll still be doing my job. Actually, I've received a whole lot of support from the Vindolanda team to do this, and everyone is very happy for me and just going, come on, you can do it. I believe Andrew's been through the same process of doing a PhD as he was also being the director of excavations. So it's good to have that mind of experience to rely upon. And I guess to answer your question, I'm very happy to stay here. Of course, there is all those kind of things like career progression and things like that. But when you've got a place like this behind your shoulders, you're just happy to stay and dig and talk to people and spread the knowledge that we are lucky to sit upon with other people.
Wonderful. Okay, well, it is getting late. We're about to be kicked out of the museum. So.
Oh yes.
So thank you so much for your time this evening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming back, and I look forward to any other visit you might want to pay.
Great. Excellent. Yeah, sorry.
And boom.
And go.
I we going to have some bloopers? I hope we're going to have some bloopers. Right.
And go. Good evening, Marta Alberti.